Today, we are diving into one of the most transformative shifts of the 21st century. I mean, the complete overhaul of modern romantic relationships.
Yes, sure.
Everything is different now, from how we meet to what we demand from a partner to the profound influence of technology and just evolving cultural norms.
It's truly a radical departure. The structures and, the expectations that defined relationships just 20 or 30 years ago are kind of dissolving. They're making way for something much more fluid, much more complex, and really driven by individual choice.
So our mission in this deep dive is to dissect these modern connections. We're going to look at how they contrast with traditional views, analyze the psychological fallout of dating tech.
Which is huge.
Oh, it's huge. And we'll explore the new lexicon that defines these partnerships and examine what happens when love crosses cultural borders. We want you to walk away not just with definitions, but with the key insights into why this shift is even happening.
Right. And we've got a stack of research here detailing these trends, providing both the macro view and some very granular personal examples. It's time to understand the landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the defining characteristics of modern love. I mean, what are the fundamentals of partnership today?
I think the most striking change is the emphasis on fluidity and flexibility. In the traditional model, roles were often fixed based on gender. It was the script you were just handed.
Right.
Today, roles are far more likely to be negotiated and reassessed and, worked out entirely between the two individuals involved.
And that immediately puts so much pressure on communication. It means open, honest communication isn't just nice to have. It's the structural foundation.
It's everything.
Yeah,
And that requires emotional intelligence.
absolutely.
Emotional intelligence, that capacity to understand, manage, and respond appropriately to both your own feelings and your partner's, it becomes paramount. If there's no pre-written script, you have to be highly skilled at kind of reading the room and meeting complex emotional needs. It's about being present, not just going through the motions.
And crucially, we see this high value placed on individual autonomy within the partnership. It seems like people are consciously resisting that idea of merging into one person.
Yes, the goal is connection, but it's a connection that allows each individual to maintain their sense of self, their separate interests, their professional ambition.
And that desire for personal authenticity, that has led to a much wider acceptance and just visibility of diverse relationship types and structure.
Whether it's through conscious choice or changing societal attitudes, the monolithic one-size-fits-all model is fading fast.
Yeah. Okay, so to really grasp the weight of this shift, let's quickly contrast it with the traditional view. What was relationship success based on, say, decades ago?
Well, historically, marriage was often seen less to the lens of individual fulfillment and more as a social and economic necessity.
A practical arrangement.
Exactly. A practical arrangement, often a means of consolidating resources or just ensuring stability. And gender roles were super clearly defined. The husband is provider, the wife is homemaker.
And of course, the societal pressure was immense. I mean, divorce was a huge taboo, and the process of courtship itself was often public and heavily regulated by family and community approval. It was about fitting into a social order.
Contrast that rigid structure with today's focus on personal fulfillment. It really highlights how much the core driver of partnership has changed. We're not marrying for stability anymore. We're partnering for growth and for emotional depth.
Which brings us to the concept of the soulmate. It feels like that idea has evolved from this romantic destiny to something more achievable maybe, but also more demanding.
It has. The older idea was almost passive. You were, waiting for a mystical preordained person to just show up and complete you. The modern version sees finding a soulmate less about destiny and more about active creation. It's about finding someone with deep compatibility and shared values, and then committing to build a fulfilling partnership together, day after day.
So if it's active creation, that means the relationship itself is a continuous project. But doesn't that present a potential for burnout? Doesn't the constant pressure to be optimizing and creating lead to fatigue compared to, the simpler clarity of just following traditional expectations?
That's a key tension in modern dating for sure. The endless options and the high bar we set for emotional compatibility certainly raise the stakes. But the reward, according to the sources, is a relationship that feels genuinely authentic and customized to the partners involved, rather than one just inherited from culture.
That sets the stage beautifully for the biggest modern disruptor of all. Because if individual autonomy and emotional depth are key, The tool that both enables and challenges those goals is technology. I mean, online platforms have broadened the sheer possibility of connection exponentially. They've dismantled geographical limits.
Yes, but this digital abundance, it comes with specific psychological effects. We really need to talk about the vocabulary that's been born from this intersection of tech and dating.
Okay, let's start with swipe culture. We all know the mechanics, quickly evaluating profiles, but what's the real social implication of this hyper-evaluation?
The implication is massive. Swipe culture conditions individuals to make these snap judgments based on highly curated, minimal information. The real insight here is how this constant rapid-fire evaluation alters our ability to value nuance. Are people conditioned to immediately move on if someone isn't instantly perfect?
Reducing a complex person to a disposable profile.
Exactly.
We see that specifically in the sources. The research contained notes about Emily, who felt she was constantly being evaluated and discarded for trivial reasons after 1 or 2 dates with Liam, who, he admitted he always felt like a better option was just a notification away.
That's the paradox of choice right there. The sheer volume of options can paradoxically create this sense of disposability. People become less invested in nurturing a single, potentially flawed connection when they feel there's an endlessly filterable supply right behind the screen.
And this lack of investment leads to phenomena like ghosting. What exactly is ghosting, and why is it so prevalent now?
So ghosting is the abrupt, unexplained end of all communication after dating or establishing some kind of connection. No text, no call, just silence. And while avoidance isn't new, its prevalence is.
Is it just that technology has made people feel less accountable for basic human decency?
I think so, yes, in part. The asynchronous nature of digital communication lets someone exit a relationship without having to face the emotional reality or, the discomfort of the other person's feelings.
It's this interesting erosion of responsibility because the connection felt real on one side, but the exit is entirely dehumanized on the other. And then we have the darkest side of digital deception, catfishing.
Catfishing is, it's the creation of a completely fabricated online identity. False photos, false life stories, specifically to deceive and manipulate someone. This is serious stuff, often resulting in emotional trauma or financial loss. It just highlights the inherent vulnerability of relying solely on a digital presentation for an emotional connection.
Let's shift our focus now to commitment itself, because as the norms move beyond that simple traditional binary, the language has had to adapt to capture these gray areas. The first is the increasingly common and often anxiety-inducing situationship.
A situationship is that ambiguous middle ground. It's significantly more involved than just being casual. There's intimacy, there are romantic feelings, shared time, but it lacks the explicit labels, the defined expectations, and the shared future commitment of a partnership.
It's the relationship that lives in constant limbo. And the danger is often that while it provides flexibility for one person, it can be a major source of anxiety for the other if they are secretly holding out for a commitment that never arrives.
Precisely. If expectations remain unspoken, the dynamic can become really unbalanced. It just emphasizes the need for crystal clear, conscious negotiation, even if that negotiation results in an arrangement that is intentionally non-committal.
And as we talk about intentional arrangements, we move into structures that consciously exist outside of traditional monogamy. Let's clarify the definitions for open relationships and polyamory.
An open relationship is one where both partners have explicitly agreed that having other sensual or romantic connections is acceptable. The core requirement here is absolute mutual consent and clearly established, sometimes complex, boundaries. It is a conscious structural choice.
So how does that fundamentally differ from polyamory?
Polyamory goes further than just opening up sensual boundaries. It's characterized by the potential for having multiple loving, intimate, and often long-term relationships simultaneously, with the full knowledge and consent of everyone involved. The focus is less on sexual freedom and more on the emotional capacity and ethical framework to sustain multiple deep emotional connections.
It's fascinating how language has had to stretch to accommodate the emotional complexity of people today. And another area where flexibility is essential is in gender roles. We're seeing a significant shift away from those rigid patriarchal scripts towards egalitarian dynamics.
The shift is huge. In relationships striving to be egalitarian, meaning based on equality, roles are no longer determined by biological gender. Instead, responsibilities, whether domestic, financial, or emotional, are negotiated based on individual preferences, schedules, or skills.
It's the ideal, but the source material suggests it's not always easy to execute. We read the notes about Sarah and Mark struggling to maintain an equitable division of labor, even though they both intellectually agreed to it.
That anecdote is critical. Even highly egalitarian couples often find themselves defaulting back to these subconscious gender scripts they inherited from childhood or culture. The true challenge of egalitarianism isn't agreeing on a chore chart. It's the daily, constant negotiation and the active rejection of those deeply ingrained, outdated scripts.
Which goes back to emotional intelligence.
It all does. This is where you need it, valuing a partner's perspective and skills completely outside of those old gender assumptions.
Now, in an increasingly globalized world, relationships are literally spanning the globe. Cross-cultural relationships are becoming far more common thanks to travel and the connectivity of online life.
They're incredibly enriching, merging different worldviews, but they bring a specific set of hurdles that, monogamous same-culture couples rarely face. The first challenges are the subtle ones. Language nuances, which often mask much deeper cultural differences in values, communication styles, and expectations around family or emotional expression.
And the practical issues must be overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the logistics. Visas, immigration processes, the practical difficulties of managing long distance for years, and then the huge life-altering decision of where the couple will ultimately settle. These are major hurdles that require extraordinary commitment.
So how do couples manage to bridge those gaps and sustain such high-stakes relationships?
It requires a high degree of intercultural communication competence. This is the specialized skill of communicating effectively and respectfully with sensitivity to a different cultural background. It involves being highly adaptable and keenly aware that your partner's behaviors, reactions, and expectations might be completely foreign to your own experience.
The notes about Nadia and Jake really brought this home. They were constantly navigating what seems like minor disagreements over, like, punctuality or family boundaries, but realized those were actually symptoms of a fundamental cultural clash.
Yes, that clash can lead to intense conflict, and often one partner may face a process of assimilation, adapting, or even sacrificing their own cultural practices to fit into their partner's environment. And this dynamic demands profound mutual respect to ensure neither partner feels completely lost or erased.
We've covered a massive amount of territory, from the digital sphere to global borders. Let's quickly cement the most critical vocabulary we've discussed, the language you need to be fluent in to understand modern relationship dynamics.
Okay, starting with living arrangements, we have cohabitation, living together unmarried, which is now a fully normalized alternative to traditional marriage. Then there's the bedrock of modern connection, emotional intimacy.
Which is that deep connection built on mutual trust, openness, and vulnerability, that willingness to be emotionally honest and transparent. That's really the engine of depth, right?
It is. Now, for comparison, we identified a toxic pattern, codependency. That's the unhealthy emotional reliance where one person systematically prioritizes the partner's needs above their own, blurring essential personal boundaries.
And finally, let's revisit compatibility. It's not about perfection, but about having the necessary foundation.
Right. Compatibility is the degree to which two people can harmoniously coexist and build a shared, fulfilling life. The key is shared core values and similar life goals. It's about being aligned on the big things that allow you to support each other's growth rather than constantly pulling in opposite directions.
And we've used the experiences of Emily and Liam navigating apps, Sarah and Mark negotiating their egalitarian home life, and Nadia and Jake dealing with cross-cultural hurdles to illustrate these concepts. It shows that these aren't just academic terms, they are the lived realities of relationships today.
Exactly. And if we step back and ask, so what does this all mean? The biggest takeaway is how utterly dynamic and fluid modern relationships are. They are constantly being reshaped, not just by external technology, but by conscious internal effort and negotiation. Understanding these shifts and the new language around them isn't optional. It's vital for building meaningful connections today.
And that leads us to a really powerful final thought drawn from the source material. It's the quote, "Relationships are less about finding the right person and more about becoming the right person."
That quote fundamentally shifts the focus away from the external search, the swipe, the filtering, the waiting, and places the responsibility squarely on internal growth. It asks us to look at relationship building as an act of self-improvement and awareness.
So for everyone listening, as you mull over everything we've explored, the necessity of radical communication, the challenges of digital dating, the flexibility of modern structures, ask yourself, what does it mean for you to become the right person in this modern relationship world? What specific emotional intelligence and understanding do you want to cultivate to build and sustain those deep, meaningful connections?
That's your challenge. Keep learning, keep evolving, and keep applying what you learn to the relationships that matter most.
All right. That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.